Hi, everybody. My name is Sophia. I'm the Client Success Lead here at ClickUp. Thank you so much for taking the time to attend our Working with Clients webinar today. Today, I'm going to be walking you through some features that are specifically going to help you improve communication with clients and your teammates to make sure that nothing is slipping through the cracks in larger client projects. The webinar today should take about 40 to 45 minutes, after which I will be answering some questions related to larger use cases live for you here. So we do have some client success reps here to moderate your questions, and keep in mind we'll try to address as many of those as we can. It looks like we have quite a few attendees here today, and then at the end I'll take some time to answer some larger questions for you here. And lastly, you will receive a recording of this after the webinar is complete, so you'll be able to watch it again at your convenience or even share it with others. All right, so let's jump into the platform. So there are several tools that you can utilize in ClickUp to work on client projects, both internally within your own organization, but you can also add clients as guests and use ClickUp as a way to communicate progress with them, even creating a client portal with something like our dashboard reporting widgets. I want to start off by talking about a few recommendations for how you can organize client projects with our ClickUp hierarchy. So one way that you can consider doing this is just creating one space to house all of your clients. And you can see here that I've actually created a private space. So I'm able to control who in my internal organization can work inside of the space. You might want to start by creating a folder for the service that you're offering. So this is a good solution if you offer maybe one or two select services, and you can create a folder for each service that you're offering with a list for each client that you are currently working with. So you can see here, I have a couple of lists for my clients, and I've actually created tasks for the different services that they've booked for me. And I'm using a drop-down custom field to indicate the manager from my organization that's going to be on site for that event. And also I have a couple of custom fields for the contact information for my venue that I'm working at, as well as some notes that I should know about for the event. You can also consider creating a folder for each client that you're working with. So if you work with quite a few different clients and you have some flexibility in the services that you offer for those clients, you could always create a folder per client and then add a list for each of those different services that you're going to provide to the client. I did want to mention before I get too much further that if you do have questions that you'd like to convey to our customer success team, make sure to use the QA portal in Zoom. Chat is a great place to have internal conversations with your teammates, but the best place to convey those questions to the ClickUp support team would be in our QA tab, and that's what we'll be checking out at the end to answer some of those larger use case questions. So now let's just jump back in. So in the second example here, I've created a folder for a client that I'm working with, and then I have lists for the different services that I'm offering. And then inside of each of those lists, I've created a task to categorize the different tasks necessary to satisfy that larger list. And again, custom fields are a great way to indicate to a client that something is ready for review. So if you do decide to invite a client as a guest, you can add a drop-down field to let them know when something is ready for them to take a look at. If you want to keep things really, really simple, and maybe you're just getting familiar with ClickUp, you might want to just create one single list called clients and have a task for each client that you're working with. So this is really simple if you just need one single task to categorize all of the stuff you're working on for a given client. Lastly, you can also consider creating a space for each client. We really only recommend going with this approach if you spend all of your time working with a few select clients. If you have a ton of clients, I wouldn't recommend going this route because it can get a bit cluttered and you can end up with quite a few different spaces. So in this instance, I've created a space for a client that I'm working with, and I can start to add folders for all of the projects that I'm working on for that client. So I'm working on some content creation for this client, and I have lists inside of that folder for each of the types of content that I'm developing for the client. Templates are also an extremely useful asset for people when they are working with clients and building out repeat processes for the services that they'll provide for those clients. So for example, in ClickUp, you can actually create templates from spaces, folders, lists, tasks, and even checklists inside of a task. I've created a folder here as an example template service that I'm offering to my client here. And in this instance, I'm actually offering an onboarding service to my client to help them learn more about my product. So my tasks are the different phases of that onboarding service. And this is an onboarding package that I'm going to be providing to a lot of clients that they can just purchase it if they feel like it's a good asset for their team. And so since I know this is something I'm going to be using over and over again, I'm going to save this list as a template. When you're saving an item as a template, you can choose what you want to carry over from everything to just a few custom items. Like, for example, if you didn't need the same assignees or something on all of your tasks, you could uncheck that. And you'll notice that I have a few due dates set up for this list because I'm already working actively with this client. But let's say that I want to create a new list from this template, but I need those due dates to match what's going to be convenient for my next client. So I can actually use our remap due dates feature for templates. And this will allow me to set a first due date for the new list that I'm creating from this template. So I'm going to set the first due date for the first task in that new list. And from there, ClickUp will remap all of the subsequent task due dates off of that first due date that I've created. You can also choose to remap start dates relative to the due date if you choose. So now we can see our second client list has been created and all of those due dates have maintained their distance from one another, but they've been pushed out into April. So I can schedule out my next client onboarding process really easily with that remapping templates feature. Some other really big features to be aware of when you're setting up your client workflows is, for one thing, statuses. So statuses, of course, are the steps that your tasks will move through on their way to being completed. So in ClickUp, you can actually set up statuses at many different levels. If you ended up going with something like my space example, where you create a space for each specific client that you're working with, you might want to create a single set of statuses for that entire space. So in this case, I've kept things really simple. My client just prefers to keep tasks almost like a checklist where things are considered done or not done. So that's how my tasks are moving through in this space. But you might find that you need some different workflows for specific folders or even specific lists that you're working on within a space, especially if you go with creating a folder for each client. Maybe each of your clients prefers to have a specific status workflow for their tasks. So in that case, you can actually go into the folder status settings menu, and you can create separate statuses at the folder level. We even have a really cool done status feature, which is a great way to indicate to teammates or to a client that a task is pretty much done, but it might be pending, one final review from them before it can be completely closed out and removed from view. So that's a good way to indicate different stages of completion before actually closing out the task and removing it from your view. If you want to, you can even create separate statuses for an individual list if you have some really granular workflows that you just need an individual list to move through. Keep in mind that custom fields are also incredibly flexible, so they can also be set up for specific lists, folders, spaces, or even while viewing everything in your workspace. So at any level, if you want to add a new custom field for a client folder or list, for example, just view that item and click this plus sign in list view, and you can select a new field option from any of the items that you see here. So some other ones that you might be interested in are a people custom field. If you wanted to assign, a managed by field to indicate a task manager, or adding some email custom fields to keep track of contact information, and create a CRM in ClickUp. There are tons of different options you can explore with our custom fields here. And you can even add a secondary due date. If there are several dates you need to hit related to a client task, you can add in those date fields here. Let's talk a little bit now about privacy and sharing for ClickUp folders, lists, and tasks. So we already know that we can make spaces private to specific people in our workspace, but keep in mind that you also can set up privacy and permissions for folders, lists, and tasks. So for example, if I have some sensitive client information in my folder here that I want to hide from internal teammates, I can go to the sharing and permissions menu for that folder, and I can make it private to select people. You'll also be able to set up permissions for anyone that does have access to a folder, list, or task. So anyone that I've invited to this item can be given read-only permissions, comment-only permissions, the ability to edit but not create any new tasks, or full edit access. This is also a great place to invite your clients as guests. So keep in mind, again, guests can only be invited to folders, lists, or tasks, and they will only see the folders, lists, or tasks that you specifically share with them. They won't be able to access spaces at all. So if you want to invite a client, for example, to a list, you would go to the sharing and permissions menu for that list, and you would just type in their email address here and send off their invitation. This is also where you can set up a guest permission. So if you don't want to overwhelm them with too much activity inside of the task, you could just give them read-only permissions so that they could get a readable overview of what you're doing inside of that item. Comment only, edit but not the ability to create anything new, or full edit access. You may not always want to add your clients as guests, so you might not want to overwhelm them with creating a ClickUp account, or just take a little bit off their plate. And in that case, you can always use our public sharing feature to share what you're working on with people outside of ClickUp. So you'll notice this little sharing button is visible when I'm jumping around my different levels. So when I'm viewing a space, I can publicly share at the space level, but I can also share a view at a folder or even a list level here. And when I share this, I can even embed the link on, for example, an external website, or just share a public link with a client. And I can get really granular about what's going to be visible in this shared link. So you can share everything if you wish, but you can also hide select information from people, like custom fields, comments, anything like that, so that when they're opening up a task from this publicly shared list, they wouldn't see task comments, for example. All of these things can be flexibly shared with people via that public link. In ClickUp, you also have the option to create different views at any different level that you're in. So while you're viewing a list, a folder, or even an entire space, you can see those tasks in flexible viewing options. Thus far, we've been in our list view, but you can always jump over to a board view to see your tasks arranged in a column, a calendar view to see your tasks arranged by start and due date, or even a box or a Gantt view if you prefer to see things in a timeline format. There's ways that you can also customize these views a little bit to share them with clients and make it really easy for them to see what is up for their review. So for example, I'm working with a client in this folder and I've created this custom field called Ready for Review. I really want to make it easy for my client to see in just one click what's ready for her review. So I've created a new list view and I've filtered by that custom field and just shown the tasks that have the yes entry. So it's really easy for my client to come here and jump into tasks that are ready for review and give me approval to move forward. A view that's really great for you to manage your tasks internally is a high-level overview of all of your client projects with some filtering and grouping to show just tasks that are assigned to you. So for example, let's say I want to get a high-level overview of everything that's going on inside of my client's space here. I can create a new task view just to focus in on tasks that are pertinent to me. So by default, your tasks in this board view will be grouped by status, but you can change up this grouping to alter the column headers. So for example, I might want to group my columns by due date to see tasks that are overdue and due in the future. I'm also going to jump over to me mode. So now I'm zoomed in and only seeing tasks that are assigned to me in this view. And if you want, you can even add some additional filtering. So for example, maybe I want to cut out the clutter and see tasks that are only of urgent priority, so I can really focus in on those urgent tasks. Anytime that you make a change like this to the layout of your view, whether that is sorting, filtering, grouping, make sure that you save those changes to the layout if you want those changes to be preserved the next time you come back to this view. So by saving this for everyone, now anyone that comes to this view is going to see the same thing. Tasks assigned to me, grouped by due date, filtered by priority. I'm also going to save this as a favorite. So adding favorites is a great way to keep track of your most important views so that you can jump back to them really easily. Your favorites will always be visible in your left sidebar here, and you can even pin them at the top of your screen. So now wherever I go in ClickUp, whether I jump around to a different location, I'm always able to come back to that view and zoom in on my assigned tasks, grouped by due date and filtered by priority. Let's take a moment now and jump into a task and explore some of the relevant task features for working with clients. One of my favorite features for working with clients that is really accessible is the assigned comment feature. So in the midst of a really long comment thread, it can be easy for certain things to slip through the cracks, and the assigned comment feature ensures that that is not going to happen. So if you're ready for a client to review a document or some asset that you're working with, you can actually attach that in a task comment and mention that client if they're a guest, for example. Let them know that you're ready for review, and you can actually assign the comment to them. So this is a client that I've invited as a guest to my workspace. He's always going to see this assigned comment for himself as a line item on the left side of the task. So if the comment thread gets really long, he can just click that and jump right to the comment. And he'll also see anywhere in ClickUp that he has a little purple assigned comment button to indicate that he has that incomplete assigned comment. There's also lots of really cool slash command features that you can use to add rich editing and context to your task description and also your task comments. So for example, if I hit slash inside of this comment, I can start adding a checklist for my client to review a couple of items that I've created for him to take a look at. I can just assign the comment to him. And when he's ready, he can start checking off those items and resolve his assigned comment. In addition to those public sharing options for our views, there is also public sharing inside of a task. So if you'd prefer not to invite a client as a guest and you'd rather just share an individual task, just click on the sharing link here and flip on that public sharing option. And again, you can get really granular with what you want to share inside of the task if it's important for you to keep certain elements private in that publicly shared link. Calendar view, as I mentioned, is a great way to keep track of any tasks that have existing start or due dates. You'll also be able to see if you have any unscheduled tasks over in your left sidebar here. So if you're ready to drop a client task on your agenda, you can always drag that onto the calendar, adjust its due dates as needed, and move things around. If you prefer to work in a Gantt view, you'll also be able to view any scheduled tasks and subtasks that you've set up in your workspace. And as you complete those tasks, you'll be able to hover over a list or a folder to gauge the progress percentage for tasks in that item. So you can share this view with the client to give them some progress percentage perspective, or just for internal purposes, you can monitor that progress percentage. I want to take a moment now and discuss how you can utilize dashboard reporting to share important information with your clients. All right, so we have a couple of client dashboards here, which were actually shared with us with a user, Ashley, who built out these beautiful dashboards for us to share with all of you. So basically, these showcase how you can both share information publicly inside of a client dashboard or work internally with just your teammates to monitor client progress. So there are tons of different widgets that you can create inside of these dashboards, and you'll be able to explore all of these different options here. But I've created this portal to share with my clients. You can add these clients as guests here to check them out. But we've created a video dashboard widget. So for example, you could use this to embed a video to teach your client about using ClickUp dashboards, or even a video to explain progress on a project that you're working with. You'll also be able to use note widgets to share helpful bullet points and checklist items that your client needs to complete. And you can even embed a chat widget inside of your dashboard to have a chat directly inside of the widget here. And once you're ready to start assigning tasks out to your client, you can create a task widget to do that as well. In the client management dashboard, we've created some portfolio widgets, which are a great way to link related lists and folders into one view and monitor their health and progress all together. So, you know, for example, let's say you go with the client setup where you're creating a folder for each client you're working with. You could link those folders into a portfolio or pick lists for projects you're working on related to clients. And then here I'll be able to see things like the statuses for all of the tasks in that folder or list. the progress percentage for the tasks in that location, as well as how many overdue tasks I might have there. And there are lots of different columns you can enable depending on your preference, but this is a good asset for your internal team manager to monitor client progress, or you can even share something like this with a client to give them some perspective on your progress. Here we've created a pie chart widget where you'll be able to see tasks grouped by priority that you're working on for clients. And you can get a breakdown of the percentage of tasks you have in each priority. If you're working with a bunch of different clients, you might also want to create a widget to just keep track of notes related to those clients with the text block widget option. So that way, if you have a follow-up call with them, you have an easy place to take notes and reflect back on your past conversations. If time tracking is a big part of your workflow, you might want to check out the calculation where you can keep track of time spent on tasks related to a certain client. And you'll be able to gauge things like remaining tasks allocated to a certain client with the calculation widget, so you can keep track of how much work you have left to be done for a given client. There's just a couple of more features that I'd like to touch on before we jump into some of your questions that you may have as we go through some client features. Page views are an excellent way to keep track of high-level resources related to client projects. So, for example, rather than having just a task comment thread for a specific client task, you can create a chat view with your client to talk about project progress. All you need to do is mention someone in a comment to let them know that they should attend to that chat thread. And you can even add attachments to comments in a chat to share context and relevant information. With an embed view, you can also embed things like a client invoice to share an upcoming invoice with them. You can add a mock-up for a landing page that you're working on as an embed view, or even a YouTube video you can embed directly inside of this embed view. Doc views are a great place to keep track of not only important information related to client projects, but you can also use them to keep track of internal onboarding procedures, like that. And just as we saw with our tasks, you can add lots of rich editing with our / commands inside of a doc. Docs can also be shared publicly with people outside of ClickUp. So again, you can add lots of pages to an individual doc view, which can be shared individually, or you can share the entire doc view. And you can choose to share that only with those who have access to the link, or allow ClickUp to share this doc with Google. FormView is also a really great way to manage client intake processes. So if you're using ClickUp to monitor tickets on your customer success team, or if you're a catering business and you're collecting event management requests, you can use a FormView to make that intake process really, really simple for you. So here I've created a form view to manage event requests for my catering company. I've added a description that will be visible to the client when they fill it out. And then I've created some different task fields that they'll need to fill out when they submit the form. So simple things like name and contact information, but you can also create custom fields if you want to add those into the form from any of those same options that we saw when we were in our different task views. So things like, expected date for your event, any additional notes that we should know about when you submit the form, all of that can be customized in the form. If there's a certain format that you want your tasks to, if there's a certain way that you want your tasks to look when they're submitted to ClickUp, you can also choose to use a task template. So when a form submission comes in, ClickUp will use that task template when creating the new task from that form submission. So for example, I've created a task template so that a certain person will always be assigned to new forms, new tasks created from this form request. So just as an example here, you can actually share that direct link for someone to fill out the form. So let's say that I'm going to fill out this form as a new client. I'm notified as the client that the submission has been received. And now ClickUp has received that form submission, and it's going to be added as a new task in my event requests list, which I've created specifically to manage any requests that come in from that form. So now you can see that this task already has an assignee. It's assigned to me because I used a task template that loaded that information into the task for me automatically. I'm able to see all of the fields that that person entered, and I can get to work taking action on that in the task here. Lastly, I want to touch on a few integration options that will be interesting to those of you who are working with clients in ClickUp. So anyone who has admin permissions in your ClickUp workspace will be able to check out the integrations area. A really great one that I recommend, of course, if you're using a ticketing system, you might want to look into our Zendesk integration to send Zendesk tickets and combine that workflow with ClickUp. We also have an Intercom integration available to you here. And I'd also recommend checking out our time tracking integrations, especially if you're interested in converting time tracked and ClickUp tasks into billable hours that you can invoice. You are able to check out our EverHour integration, which has great billable timesheet functionality, which makes it really easy to convert time tracked and ClickUp tasks into invoices that you can see in EverHour. So those are a few getting started features to help with your client management organization in ClickUp. And I'd like to take some time now to look at some of your questions. All right. So I see a question from C. We're puzzling over document sharing options. We would expect doc permissions to be determined based on the list they appear in. That's how tasks work. Instead, it seems like doc permissions are not determined by their location. Can you cover a quick use case on how to manage document sharing in relation to a client folder or list? This becomes an issue when trying to embed a doc. An embed isn't visible even though the doc lives in the same folder since it doesn't use the same sharing rules. So basically, how this works is when you share a folder or a list with a guest, they will see any views that have been created at that folder or list level at the top of their screen. So for example, if I shared this catering events folder with a guest, that guest would see the doc view at the top of my screen here that I've created. Unless, of course, I made it a personal view, in which case it would be only visible to myself. But guests should absolutely see any doc views that have been created for folders and lists that are shared with them. Trying to think if there are additional use cases that I can answer in regards to that. Yeah, so the permission to view the doc is dependent on whether the guest has access to the folder and list. The same thing goes for embed views. So if I create an embed view for this folder and the guest has access to the folder, he or she should see that embed view as well. I know that sometimes people might encounter initial issues with embedding like a Google Drive file. Usually that has to do with your Drive permissions, and you'd need to enable public sharing from Google Drive to embed that file. But if you have other questions about that specifically, we'd be happy to answer that at help@clickup.com so that we can get a better idea of your personal use case. Pim, you ask, I have a lot of customers, each with a lot of tasks. Because of that, I want to be able to plan not on the task level, but on the list level. So I want a list, all lists, to appear on the calendar or Gantt chart. Can you show how to do that? Yeah, so the best thing to keep in mind in that regard would be our list info feature. So for any list in ClickUp, you'll see this little eye icon next to the name of the list. And here you can actually set up a start or due date to indicate, for this client, when I their projects to start and end. So let's say I'm going to start this on April 1st and I'm going to end it on April 30th. If you want to, you can even color code your lists with our colors and labels feature to make them appear nicely on a Gantt or calendar view. And now we'll be able to see when we jump into our calendar view for April, I can see the start and due date that I've set up for that client list. It looks like, yeah, it looks like my start date didn't come through here, so let's just readjust that. But we can see now in our calendar view for April, the start and end date for that list is visible, and you'll be able to see any scheduled tasks and subtasks within that list. In a Gantt view, you'll be able to track your planned list dates versus your actual list dates, and in a little more detail. So your planned list dates are the ones that you indicate in the list info section. So you can show when you're planning to start and finish that client list. The actual dates that you see for a list in Gantt view are based on the actual first start date and last due date for tasks in that list. So it's a nice way to track side by side your planned dates versus the actual dates. And you'll see if I were to drag out a client task, it will adjust the actual dates for that list as well. Morton, you ask, is it possible to copy a dashboard? I don't believe so. Actually, it is. It looks like it's possible to duplicate it in the settings here. So if you click on the ellipses when highlighting a certain widget, you can duplicate that here. Jamie, you ask, for burn down widgets, will there soon be a way to set a start and end date? Looking to track burn down for tasks by quarter, since we have quite a few things we track on a quarterly basis. So that's actually a really good question. Let me quickly touch base with my colleague to see if he has any, and I will let you know. But I do know that we're constantly making updates to our dashboard feature. My colleagues just let me know that he's going to answer that for you, Jamie, in chat. So I'll let him take over on that one. All right. Robin, you ask, can we notify clients once a task has been completed from? Yeah, absolutely. So if the client is a guest, he or she can actually set up grant email notifications. So for example, when a task changes status, that guest can opt to get a notification via email, mobile, web app, or desktop app to let them know that the task has been changed to that completed status. But then also via something like our public sharing feature for tasks, if you share that link with them, don't feel like logging into a ClickUp account to check it out, they'd be able to see through that link when the task is set to complete status. Morton, I see you clarified your question. Can you share the dashboard with all of the widgets? I don't believe that is possible at the moment. I know that in the future, we're going to be adding an option where you can share an entire dashboard publicly, but I'm not sure at the moment regarding copying an entire dashboard. Doesn't look like it at the moment. But that is something that we may add in the future. Chris, you ask, how do we use conditional logic with forms? I think I'd probably need a little bit more clarification on your use case in that regard. If you're asking if there's a certain way, if this field is filled in with X, then this individual is assigned to the task. That's something that we may add on to forms in the future. Right now, the best way to indicate set fields when a new form is submitted as a ClickUp task would be to use the task template feature I mentioned, but conditional logic is going to consider building on more as we make updates to forms in the future. Right. Pete, you ask, is there a way to update task start and due dates for multiple tasks? Well, everything has been put on hold for 60 days, so we need to slide out all dates by 60 days. Yeah, absolutely. So the best way to do that would be similar to what I mentioned earlier with our Gantt view. So if you have a folder or a list related to a client and you say that you need to push all of the dates for that folder or list out, you could always drag and drop that in our Gantt view to reschedule all of those tasks. All right, just looking through some more questions. C, you ask, chat view doesn't seem to work with the Slack integration. We are notified in Slack but task comments, but not view comments. Are we missing something? So our Slack integration has a set number of notification options, which, let me see if I can pull up our doc on Slack, because I have not integrated Slack in this demo workspace. But these are the types of notifications that you can receive, and they're all based around tasks. So it would be new comments added to tasks, new assignees or attachments added to tasks. They're not related to views, although we may add that in the future. It's not currently part of our Slack integration. And Mike, you ask how to embed a form. So all you'll need to do if you want to embed a form on an external site is just click on this little sharing icon and copy the embed code, and you'll be able to use that to embed the form somewhere, or just use the copy link to share that link with someone outside of ClickUp. And you ask, can you share just a subtask? That is a good question. I will need to take a look. I don't believe that it's possible to just share a subtask, but if we go into the share menu for the subtask, sharing is done at the task level. So if I share this, I don't have the option to disable the parent task name and status. So by sharing the subtask, they'd also be able to jump around inside of the task as well. So at the moment, it's not possible to share just the subtask. Someone asks, how do we create task templates? Yeah, so it's really simple to create a task template. Inside of your task, just click on its ellipses here, click Save as Template, add a name to your template, and choose what you want to carry over in that template. So whenever you want to create a new task from that template, just click on the New Task button here, and you'll be able to load directly from that template into your new task. We do have time for just a few more questions. It's really great to see how many people were interested in attending this webinar. And again, we really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your questions. I'll do my best to get to a few more before we end today, but we're happy to continue your questions by contacting our support team as well at a later time. So I want to make sure that everyone gets at least one question, or people that have already had questions answered. We leave some room for people that have not yet. Jesus, you ask, is there a WordPress plugin to integrate your forms with a WordPress website? There is not at the moment. That is a feedback request that I believe we've received from other people as well. You can actually check out our feedback.clickup.com page here, and you'll be able to browse through any existing feedback requests we've gotten. I believe we've gotten one regarding a WordPress add-on, at least some similar requests, but that is not available at the moment. Let's see, we'll take a couple more questions. CJ, you ask, can read-only guests see all views? So guests will again only be able to see the views that have been created for lists and folders that have been specifically shared with them. If they're view only, if they're invited to a folder or list and have been given view only permissions, they'll still be able to see all of those views, but they'll only be able to read the information and won't be able to do anything else. All right, we'll take one last question today. Apologies if I am mispronouncing your name, Firdaus. You ask, do we have any alert messages or pending tickets? So there are lots of different ways that you can get notifications for upcoming tasks that are due. The first would be your in-app notifications. So if you're a watcher on a task, watchers are indicated under this eye icon inside of the task. You will receive notifications anytime that task has a status change. You would also receive a notification when the start or due date of the task arrives. So watchers are people that need to receive updates about changes that occur in the task, like, again, a status change, a due date change. So if you've been added as a watcher on a task, you will always get those in-app notifications when the status changes. And you can also set up granular notifications in your settings if you'd prefer to get email, mobile app, or desktop app notifications. All right, so I want to thank everyone for sending in their questions and attending the webinar today. It's really great to see how much interest there is in this session. And rest assured that we will continue to have these use case-based webinars over the next few months. And we'll very likely to working with clients as we build out more features to help with this use case. If I wasn't able to get to your question today, I apologize for that, but I did want to make everyone aware that we have a great customer success team available to contact at help@clickup.com email, or if you've created an account, you can start a chat with our team anytime by going to the help of your things here. And if you have questions, that's a great resource available to you to get that assistance. You will get a recording of this so you can watch it again at your convenience. And again, I really thank you for taking the time to attend today, and I hope that you got some useful information about working with clients in ClickUp. And we hope to hear from you soon. Thank you so much.